In this video, I'm going to explain an aspect of linguistics that I've never seen any language YouTubers or influencers talking about. If you understand this linguistic process, it will immediately supercharge your listening comprehension. But I've never heard anybody talk about it who wasn't at a linguistics conference or doing graduate level phonology. It's not even that hard to understand. I guarantee you'll understand it by the end of this video. It's just completely ignored in teaching people languages 99% of the time. So let me know if you've ever had this experience. You study a language, let's say Spanish, but it can be anything, and you study for a little while. You memorize a lot of words, you get some grammar down, and you really feel like, okay, I'm starting to get a solid grasp of the basics. And then you talk to somebody, and it's just not coming together, like at all. But the kicker, the really frustrating part is that once you figure out what they said, it was words you already know. They just somehow didn't fit together in a way that made sense to your ear. I've already talked about fast speech and casual reductions in speech in another video. That's like how you get something like "Jeet in English from "Did you eat yet?" And while that's an interesting and important part of comprehension, that's not what I'm talking about today. In fact, this is what I left out of that video and I regret not explaining. Today we're going to talk a little bit about something I call resyllabification. It's not just me, I didn't just make that term up. It's like me, Ken Stivitz, and like everybody else. But today's all about resyllabification. What it is, what it does, how it makes listening comprehension harder, and how awareness of it will build your listening comprehension skills. I'm Dr. Taylor Jones, and this is Language Jones. I don't take a lot of sponsors, and the ones I do, I use and I like. Today's video is sponsored by LingoPie. LingoPie is a video-on-demand service that has a ton of cool features. I think it particularly shines in helping with listening comprehension for casual speech. That's because they provide simultaneous captions in both your target language and English. They allow looping of videos and audio by captions, and you can even slow down the playback speed to really hear what's going on. They've got mouse-over translation, you can add words to flashcards, and they even have quizzes. Not to mention live classes, news in slow French and Spanish and so on, and my favorite, Netflix and Disney Plus integrations, so you can watch hit shows in your target language. Don't sleep on the dubbed cartoons either. So, if you'd like to continue binge-watching your favorite shows, but also get better at French, Spanish, or any of these other languages, click my link in description or use my promo code at LingoPie to get started. You're not irresponsibly vegging out while binge-watching TV, you're optimizing language learning through passive and active comprehension practice in real-world communicative contexts. And you're getting a jump on your New Year's resolution. Like, actually. So my gift to you is my discount code. Happy watching and happy learning. Oh, and it's endless practice with exactly what we're talking about today, which is why I paired them with this video. Now back to it. Okay, so you've memorized some words. You're ready to try them out. But when you talk to somebody, you sound like a total gringo, and you can't parse what on earth they're saying, even when they're using the words that you already know. Now, there's a few things that could be happening. One is just not understanding general phonological rules. So for instance, in Spanish, to keep with our example, D after a vowel can become an eth sound. Spanish speakers who do this don't even hear it, just like how American English speakers don't really hear that butter and ladder have the same middle consonant, and it's not a T or a D. There's also not knowing rules that can be triggered by phonological stress, like how we say divine but divinity and not divinity. But we're not here to talk about strict cyclicity and lexical phonology and the interactions or rule orderings and phonological outputs. That's not something you spring on somebody or something you accidentally wander into. That's something you find yourself in a hotel conference room once a year to talk about after paying way too much. Resyllabification is exactly what it sounds like. It is literally changing where the syllables start and stop. And it's actually a really common thing across languages, but it's a nightmare for language learners. The key idea that's the basis of the whole thing is actually a foundational concept in modern generative linguistics. The syntax, that is the grammar, the morphology, what the meaningful bits of words are and how they all fit together and in what order, and so on, is not the same as the phonology, how the sounds combine. In fact, how sounds combine is a different system that's not beholden to the syntax. So once you've put your words together in an order that means something, it has to be pronounced. We won't get into how much gets shipped off to be spelled out. It will never cease to blow my mind that those are the technical linguistic terms for these things. Anyway, it's not whole sentences at a time, but words that go together in smaller units than a sentence get pronunciations assigned together. So the phonology, the sound system, is working on syntactic units that are larger than the word. This is actually a huge part of why linguists disagree about what even constitutes a word. Spelling rules aren't helpful. French and Zulu often put the same syntactic bits in the same order, but French writes je vais le voir as 4 words, and Zulu writes gizombona as 1. Not only that, but they both only mark one primary stress in the whole thing, and the little pronoun bits can't actually be meaningfully separated in speech, so these are one phonological word, but could be 1 or 4 orthographic words and 4 or more syntactic words. So you've got this syntactic pieces. Let's take the words the others in Spanish. That's los otros. Los is the masculine plural definite marker, meaning the, otros is others. Just how it looks. You definitely learn these as different words, so you'll be able to add all sorts of masculine plural nouns after the los gatos, los tiburones. So you've got a one-syllable word on its own, los, and a two-syllable word, otros. And us poor language learners might naively think that you just say that one-syllable word, and then that two-syllable word, and all is right in the world. But we're wrong, because they get resyllabified. You actually get lo and then sotros. Now, I don't know about you, but if I learned los and otros, I'm listening for los and otros, not lo and sotro. And when we're starting out in a foreign language, it's actually really hard to recognize those as variations of the same thing. So in linguistics, we talk about syllables having a nucleus. Almost always a vowel, but there's some exceptions like Berber and Moroccan Arabic, and even weirder languages like English that have syllabic N's in words like button, or L's in words like cradle. Different languages differ in how they build out from this nucleus. Some only allow consonant vowel, and will add vowels to break up consonant clusters. Some allow CVC. Some, like English, allow a ton of consonants before and after the vowel, so you can get words like strengths, or in theory, sixths, as in, let me try to say my own example, as in each of the sixths of all the sixes that are the most sixth, that is, the sixths are sixths. There's also a ton of rules about what can and can't go together in the same syllable. The beginning of a syllable is called the onset, and the end is called the coda. The onset, generally, and I mean practically universally, follows what's called the sonority hierarchy. No, not sorority hierarchy. This is a different topic for a different day, but it's basically that sounds get more sonorous towards the vowel and less further away. We also have other sequencing rules we're totally unaware of, which is why you can have the T in Atlantic change to a glottal stop, Atlantic, but not the T in attractive, attractive. We can have a syllable onset like tra, but we can't have tla, because we don't speak Klingon or Tlingit, which totally does allow that. So resyllabification is just how languages shuffle around which sounds are grouped together for pronunciation purposes. But they don't respect word boundaries, so you end up with a bunch of just excellent syllables, few or none of which line up perfectly with, the words you learned. To take a classic example from Harris 1983, reproduced in Kinstovich, I'm using the 2001 edition of his 1994 book on generative phonology, the others were on the airplane get syllabified in Spanish like this. I'm going to do my best. The words you learned would be los otros estaban en el avión, but the syllabification is actually los otros estaban en el avión. Los otros estaban en el avión, or avión. To make matters worse, some of the phonological rules we follow basically have the function of demarcating word boundaries. So in most varieties of English, word final T is not aspirated or even released. It can become a glottal stop or an unreleased T. This really messed me up when I first started learning Hebrew because I would hear word final things, suffixes like it and ot, where not only did the T get resyllabified as a syllable onset, but it was even released or even sounded aspirated to me, meaning I immediately automatically parsed it as both the beginning of a syllable and the beginning of a word. As an aside, this is basically one of the big problems we found in a paper I co-authored 5 years ago looking at court reporter transcriptions of Black Americans speaking Black English. Court reporters who don't speak or understand it had a really hard time figuring out word boundaries and correctly transcribing, mostly because they did not have sufficient training on that specific task. But that's a different topic for a different day. Leave me a comment if you want to know more. Back to Spanish, there's a really interesting 2017 dissertation from Daniel Scarpace looking at Spanish spoken as an L2 by English speakers. A big takeaway is that English speakers tended to overemphasize words that start with vowels by adding a glottal stop before the vowel, like we do in English, rather than resyllabifying. Los otros, not los otros. They also underapplied a regular pattern in Spanish where R is trilled not just in the middle of words like perro, but actually just between vowels, including across word boundaries, like berrocas. Now, I've had a teacher explicitly state this rule in a lesson from one of the sponsors on my other videos, and both anecdotally and from the academic literature, it seems like teaching it is effective for second language learners to get it in their pronunciation. What's crazy about this is that there's a lot of research on how you teach L2 learners to produce the right syllabification, especially if there are secondary cues like trilling R, but there's not a lot on how you train yourself to recognize it. Thankfully, what's most promising is that there's an avenue of research that suggests that simply teaching people that resyllabification exists at all seems to help. And teaching people how to correctly resyllabify things, like saying los otros están, might actually be enough to improve listening comprehension as well. Big shout out to Elizabeth Kissling for that whole research program. So now, as far as the scientific evidence can be brought to bear, I have delivered on the promise of this video. I told you about resyllabification. Leave me a comment and let me know if you already knew about this or if you didn't. And I promised that if you don't already know about this, it would immediately supercharge your listening comprehension. According to the research, awareness alone is sufficient to improve, so that's true. Of course, you can even accelerate that by practicing producing the right resyllabification in your target language. Definitely let me know if this makes a difference for you. I know that understanding resyllabification combined with fast speech forms really made a huge difference. I used to be completely unable to recover something like hem omdim aliad ha misada from em omdim aliada misada. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, and definitely leave me a comment. It is great for the algorithm. If you'd like to support the channel, you can do so right here on YouTube through Super Thanks, or over at patreon.com/languagejones. Until next time, happy learning.